Yo, what's going on, everyone? It's Brian and Jim here of DrinkABeerandPlayAGame, and today we are reviewing a very special game with Sonic 3 and Knuckles.
Yes, we are doing the full Sonic 3 and Knuckles story, and this is a Patreon review request by our buddy J Manifesto, Phony Montana. We didn't know him as Joe. So, yes, thank you, Joe, for the suggestion. Weirdly enough, neither of us before this have played the full experience. I grew up with Sonic 3 on its own. Bri, any of them?
Oh, I love Sonic 1 and 2. And Sonic 3, I rented a few times as a kid, but never beat it.
Alright, so we're coming into this fresh, 2022. This will be interesting.
Sure will.
Let's get into it. Originally released in 1994, this was developed by Sega Technical Institute and published by Sega. So this was famously released as two separate $50 releases. Why? Well, because of McDonald's. They had a licensing deal to have it as a Happy Meal toy, and they just needed to have the game out in time. So they decided, we're not going to get this done in time, so we're going to split it. So in February of 94, we got Sonic the Hedgehog 3. In October of 94, we got Sonic and Knuckles. This is, up to this point, definitely the most ambitious Sonic title, and it's one of the most loved, not only of just the series, but one of the most loved games of all time. Let's see if it lives up to the hype.
The graphics. Sonic on the Sega Genesis is debatably the pinnacle of graphics on this system. It's the one that most people remember, and it's for good reason. All 14 levels look pretty damn amazing, and they're all fairly unique. But what really stands out here are all the little touches. So the first thing we notice compared to the first two Sonic games is in between levels, you're going to have these nice transitions. And they're not just, okay, you're going on to the next level. You're either getting shot in a cannon or transported one way or another. So there's this nice continuity, which Jim will touch upon when he talks about the gameplay. But let's also take a minute and look at the characters themselves. Sonic, they gave him a little bit of a different style this time. They made his sprite a little bigger. I like to call him the chunky Sonic in this one, as his hands and feet definitely grew in size, and that belly looks like he's been putting down a few too many beers. But other than that, he still looks pretty excellent. Tails and Knuckles look great. All the bosses look good. There is a lot to love, but where this really stretches the system and its limitations is all the added parallax scrolling, all the little details of what's going on in the background as you're going through these stages. And I absolutely love early in stages, you get a lot of these interactive cutscenes. Like in the ice cap zone when he's snowboarding down that hill. That to me is probably the most memorable part of the game. And all these little touches are nice, and say what you will about the bonus stage, whether you like it or not, those always are a really cool feature. With all that being said, this game is damn near perfect when it comes to graphics, so we both gave it 9s. And when it comes to beer, I'm going to add one celebratory beer for those awesome animations.
The music. So, let's just get this out of the way. The music in this game is really, really well composed. It's great. And obviously, we have to talk about the Michael Jackson elephant in the room. So, for years, this was the biggest open secret, but something that Sega was so hush-hush about in such a weird way. There were all these rumors going around. Until June of 2022, when Yuji Naka basically said, oh, they didn't put the Michael Jackson tracks on the Origins collection. So, there you go, it's confirmed. My little tin cap conspiracy. So, when you combine Sonic 3 with Sonic and Knuckles, a bunch of tracks get cut that were only in Sonic 3. So, I'm thinking that's probably the Michael Jackson songs. So, I don't know if that's correct. They'll probably never say, but there you go. But outside of that, they are really well composed. If there's a criticism, though, none of them are really as good as any of the tracks you would find in 1 or 2 or even CD, especially the Japanese CD. Oh boy. Again, they're great tracks, but with the exception of maybe Ice Cap and Flying Battery Zones, none of the music in the game just really grabbed me or left as much of an earworm as before. But again, it's still really well done. I do like the fact that there are a few more sound effects thrown in from the usual. That comes from the elemental shields, which I'll get to in a bit, but outside of that, there really wasn't a ton added sound-wise outside of the new music tracks. So, I gave it a 9 and Brian gave it an 8. And when it comes to beer, I'll just add one for what could have been with the King of Pop.
The control. Here's the deal, if you've played the first 2 Sonic games, then you know what to expect. But as we mentioned, now that you have Knuckles and Tails, you also have new powers for all the characters. So with Sonic, you have this Insta-Shield, which is a very nice little buffer, and it's honestly one of the best reasons to play as him, other than the fact that he has the highest jump. With Tails, obviously you can fly, and then with Knuckles, you have the ability to not only glide, but if you go up to a wall, you can climb up it. It's still, at the end of the day, a one-button game, but here's the one thing they throw in here. The ability, once you collect the Chaos Emeralds, to turn into super versions, and we'll get to the hyper version of Sonic, but to get to these super versions, all you have to do is hit up and jump, and you're off to the races. Everything else is exactly like Sonic 1 and 2, but this game feels the need to add in a lot more of these, I'll call them puzzle elements. For example, in the Carnival Night Zone, these goddamn annoying ass barrels, I can't tell you how long it took me to figure out how do you control them. And to be honest, I don't know if I even still did them right. After getting past it, I did a combination of just holding down and then pushing up. It was really a matter of luck if you figured it out the first time. And sure, once you know it, you might be able to get it down. I still couldn't after multiple tries. Maybe that's because I'm dumb, or maybe it was just a little too complicated for its own good. And speaking of complicated, these bonus stages. Good looking stages, interesting idea, but the turning and everything in it definitely has a delay. And it's really just the limitations of the system itself. And I'm not trying to hate on that piece, but that delay can cause you to end up hitting one of the red spheres and ending your run, which can be kind of bullshitty. Yes, you can get used to it, and you can compensate for it, but man, does it get annoying. Outside of that, though, this game still controls basically perfect. So when it comes to scores, I gave it an 8, Jim gave it a 9. When it comes to beer, I'm going to give it 2 for those weird-ass puzzles and that annoying-ass bonus stage.
The gameplay. So, for the first time in about 8 years of doing this damn show, I scripted out my section for this. I have a lot of things to say. So let's start with the basics. It's a Sonic game. You run fast, grab rings, fight bosses, collect Chaos Emeralds, and save the world from Dr. Robotnik. Sonic 3 gives you the game slave slots, the first 6 levels, 1 bonus stage, and the Blue Sphere special stages. Sonic & Knuckles gives you the last 6 levels, 2 new bonus stages, some bonus sphere levels, and no save slots, but it does have this lock-on technology that you can use with Sonics 1 through 3. So Sonic 1 gives you 130 million levels of Blue Sphere. Sonic 2 lets you play the game as Knuckles, and Sonic 3 unlocks the full experience. So the combined game also has the Master Emerald area, which lets you go for the Super Chaos Emeralds and get Hypersonic, which I'll get to in a bit. The game introduces 3 new types of elemental shields: fire, water, and electric. Fire protects you from flames and lets you do a dash attack. Water gives you a bounce attack to flex certain projectiles and lets you breathe underwater. And the electric shield lets you do a double jump and attracts nearby rings to you. Each one is really handy, it's fun to mess around with, and they have different advantages with different bosses. So all of them are really fun to let you kind of play the game differently and exactly how you want to. This game also introduces Knuckles the Echidna. So we all know the story by now. Robotnik landed in Angel Island, told him that Sonic was the bad guy, come to steal his emeralds. Knuckles tries to make his life hell, and by the end of the game, Robotnik turns on him, they join up and become heroes, blah 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 blah. He has his own moveset, mainly gliding and climbing on walls, as well as destroying certain obstacles just by touching them. So depending on who you ask, he's pretty much considered the hard mode, though some people think he's OP. And you can also play as either Sonic and Tails, Sonic alone, Tails alone, or Knuckles alone. So if you have a buddy, Tails could be a handy co-op partner who can carry you to far-off places that Sonic can't get to alone. Tails alone can basically fly over a ton of levels, and he can swim, so he's basically the easy mode of the game. If you play with Tails following Sonic, there's sometimes you can get lucky with Tails and basically glitch and kill Robotnik without you doing any work. It's kind of fun to pull off when you can. Special stages have always been the worst part of Sonic games, but Blue Sphere is probably the best one. Now, don't go thinking that they're actually fun, because they're still not. Some of the layouts can get to be pretty brutal, and the checkerboard luck will definitely mess with your eyes after a while, but it's still better than the specials from all the games before. And really, a lot of them since. So the fact that you get save slots means it's actually worth going for the emeralds, since you can save your progress and save all your super variants that you unlock along the way. There are a lot of hidden rings to access through this game, but your first time through, you're not going to know these stages, so you're going to mess up a lot. But one good thing is, after you beat the story and get the bad ending, you can kind of just go back, hit a special stage, try again, and click reset. So you can kind of grind your way to all the Chaos Emeralds if you do want to do it that way as well to see the good ending. Supersonic makes his return from Sonic 2, but new and exclusive to this game is Hypersonic, which comes after you unlock all the Super Emeralds, so 14 damn emeralds in total. But he is cool because he has this awesome flash attack, he's even faster, jumps higher, and getting every single emerald unlocks the final stage of the game, which gives the best endings for each individual cart and character. So you can also get Super Tails and Hyper Knuckles with it. As a kid, I grew up with Sonic 3. I didn't get my copy until the turn of the century, so I was late to the party, but I went through the whole game, got the Chaos Emeralds, and I played a lot of it, but even back then, I didn't really love Sonic 3. And it wasn't because of the shortened game length either. It's the stage design. Every stage in this game is so big and meant to be explored and tackled differently to get to the end goal. So outside of Sonic CD, it's way less linear than any other Sonic game that came before it, for better or for worse. So the better is, if you're a Sonic fanatic, you have huge playgrounds to test out and enjoy. The bad side, if you aren't a Sonic freak, these levels are just too damn big and tedious. So before this, I had never timed out in a Sonic level, and the idea seemed crazy to me. So it's a franchise based around speed, and these levels are so confusing to navigate that you will lose lives and time out so many times. Granted, it's easy to gain a ton of lives, but it's kind of a sign of things to come with the series. So Yuji Naka always wanted Sonic games to be built around speed, platforming, and exploration, and that's on display here. But it can also make it feel unfocused. So I get that you don't want to have every level play out the same way, but even then the levels can't seem to decide whether they want to be a big platformer based on exploration, or these cinematic speed platformers based on spectacle. I guess it's cool you can decide how you want to do it, but you can either wind up playing it and go, yeah, that was okay, or you can obsess over it. So Brian and I were definitely in the former camp there. I was ready to write this game off as completely overrated after beating it, but you know what? I eventually figured out how to have fun with it. Because of this review, I went back to grind for the emeralds and to get more footage and to play as every character, and after a while I just got bored and just started fucking around. And that's when I had fun. Like, I just pretty much YOLO'd the levels, made as many crazy speed combinations as I could, tried to make as many high jumps as I could, find as many different spots as I could for more different rings, and that's when I was having a fun time. It was a playground. So if you go into this like a normal 2D platformer, even like Sonic games beforehand, you're going to have a bad time at first, because the giant levels are just too boring and just unyielding. It's a game that's not designed around first-time players, which I always hate, because in Sonic 1 and 2, you can enjoy them whether it's your first time or your 100th time. I hate games that are like, oh, you have to play it for a few hours before it gets good. I hate that. This game kind of reminds me of like Minecraft, where it does have an adventure, but you'd never really play it that way. You use it as a Lego set, and that's what Sonic 3 reminds me of. You kind of have to play it like a remote-controlled car, where you just mimic those commercials from the 90s and try to go as fast as you can and make these crazy jumps without breaking your toy. That's what it really feels like to me and when it's fun. So as a platforming game alone, it's kind of a chore, but as a toy, it's a lot of fun. A lot of people like to say that Sonic Adventure was where the series shifted into being more focused on spectacle, but I think that kind of happened here. It just feels like it's the start of where the game kind of catered itself more towards actual Sonic fans and not gamers in general. A lot of other people have said this, but obviously some perfect Sonic levels are like Green Hill Zone and Chemical Plant Zone. They're reused so much in the series going forward to the point of exhaustion. None of the levels in this game seem to reach those heights. You have some really good ones like Ice Cap and Flying Battery, but outside of them, nothing seems to just hit those high notes that the earlier games did. These complaints aside, the core mechanics are so tight that if you call it a bad game, you're just being a contrarian, and it added a lot. It added the mini-bosses, and yeah, I mean, it's cool to have that ending, but I just think it's kind of clunky, but it is a cool cinematic ending, so whatever. So if you haven't played it before, do yourself a favor and just play the full version, because if you play either the halves on their own, playing the full version doesn't really complete it to the point where you can be like, oh, I see what everyone's saying, until you put a lot of time into it. So with all of that being said, we both gave it 7s. Now, I know I just did a lot of praising, but you know what? There are some goddamn bullshit newbie trap sections in this game too that will insta-kill you until you know exactly what you're doing. Noob track sections, and for just the fact you have to play it a bunch before you have fun, we couldn't give it more than that. So when it comes to beer, we're just going to add 2 beers. One for those noob trap killers, and 2 for just those ungodly big levels and timing out.
The originality. Well, Jim just covered a whole lot, so luckily I don't need to cover as much, but if you heard him say one thing, you should really focus on the fact that this did feel like a divergence from the first 2 Sonic games. The first 2 were very beginner friendly, and you could really learn all the secrets. This one is not beginner friendly at all, and it seemed to focus so much more on exploration that it felt like a different Sonic experience for me. And as a kid who grew up with Sonic 1 and 2, I loved the ever-loving shit out of those games. This one, there was a reason I never went back and beat it as a kid, because I kind of got bored and got tired of dying in those open-ass levels. So that alone gave it a different feel. Add in the fact that you have the elemental shields, you have the powers, you have Knuckles now, and you have just these 3, you can call them 3 different campaigns. There's a lot new to the series that we've never seen to this point. But outside of all that, the core gameplay and the levels themselves really just take cues from the first 2 games. A lot of recycled ideas. The only new things I really saw were some of the traps like the blue spheres or the seesaw, and I don't necessarily think they were put there for good, but hey, it was something new. With all that being said, we both gave it 6s. We recognize that there is a lot being introduced for a 3rd title in a series. So when it comes to beer, I'll give it 1 because you know what? They were trying something new. And most people seem to really like it.
All right, the replayability. We've basically gone over everything at this point. You have the different characters. You have the slightly different campaigns. You have all the bonus stages, all the emeralds you can go back for. Just having save slots to dig around with the levels that you just want to replay again. And there's even a competitive multiplayer thing, so it's very bare bones. You get a number of extremely short levels that are just meant to be lapped about 5 times. And you get 3 modes with like time attack, match play, and the Grand Prix where you get to play all of them in a row. It's a fun little distraction. It's nothing special. It's nice they have exclusive music tracks, but really, after 1 or 2 playthroughs with a buddy, you're never going to go back to it. With that being said, we still gave it 7s. And when it comes to beer, I'm just going to add 1 beer for the multiplayer basically being an afterthought.
So overall, what's weird is Jim and I kind of feel like we're defending our opinion here, but at the end of the day, we both think this is still a great game. The problem is, we kind of feel it's a little overrated.
Yeah, so I watched like 2 dozen different videos breaking down Sonic 3 and Knuckles, trying to see what I was missing and where people were coming from. And depending on who you look at, it's either the best Sonic game, the best game of the Sega Genesis, the best game of the 16-bit era, or all the way up to the best game of all time. And here's what it is. It comes down to nostalgia. And I'm not here to crap on people's nostalgia. For a lot of people, this really is their favorite game, and you'll never talk them out of that. And that's great. But it has a lot more flaws than people give it credit for. And the flaws itself, people kind of wash away because they've already been at the point 1,000 times where they've played through it and they just love playing around with it. And really, once you get the hang of it, it's an extremely easy game with a lot of bullcrap parts that are just made to just give you cheap deaths and annoy you. And there's a couple gimmicks like the spinning discs or the barrels or the insta-kills. There's a few things here and there that's just like, I get it, it can't be even easier than it already is, but it's still annoying. But it's a really, really, really well-made game. And if you're going to play it at all, find one of the ways to play it together, whether you find a straight-up emulator of it, if you play it off the Sonic Mega Collection or the Origins Collection or the real thing. Play combined how you can because it is a cool experience. But just keep in mind, if you're new to this, you're probably not going to really love it unless you put a couple playthroughs into it.
Yeah, and as I said throughout the review, being such a huge Sonic 1 and 2 fan, I was so excited to play this and think, I'm going to beat it. When I realized the time commitment, I just don't have enough time. I don't see myself going back and really wanting to do this. This actually made me want to play the first 2 a little more. But like Jim said, we get why people really love it. There's a lot of game in these 2 titles. So with all that being said, I gave it an 8, Jim gave it a 9. When we combine all of our scores together, it rounds out to an 8. And if you know our scoring system, that is really goddamn high, because we're not the type to just shell out 10s left and right. So, still an excellent game. It's not our favorite Sonic. It's definitely not our favorite Genesis game, but it's still really good, and you should play it if you get the opportunity.
Yep, definitely. And once again, we want to give a huge shout out to our good old buddy Joe. Thank you so much for recommending this to us and for the support as always. And if you want to get yourself a little video game review in request, head on over to our Patreon. $5 gets you bonus content on our podcast, game review requests, and even exclusive videos that we put out.
Absolutely. With that, we want to say thank you guys, and cheers.
Cheers, everybody.
When it comes to beer pairing, I decided to go with La Fin du Monde from Unibrow, which is based out of Quebec, Canada. This is a 9% triple that packs so much beer in one bottle, and it is friggin' delicious. Much like Sonic 3, if you're not really into beers and you're not really looking for a deep experience, this may be a bit too much for you, but for those who appreciate good beer, you will truly appreciate this one. So grab a couple bottles, sit back, and enjoy this robust beer with such a big game. But remember to drink your beers and play your games responsibly.